Hello and welcome to LSE Focus. It is pre-match build-up showtime with Liverpool once again in action. This time it's Wednesday night. It's a Champions League game. It is, of course, the second leg of our quarter-final tie against Porto. Liverpool already 2-0 up from the first leg, which has kind of contributed to the general feeling of, that I think seems to be surrounding this tie. Everyone's kind of seen it as a foregone conclusion that Liverpool are going to go through, and I think the fact we won 2-0 in the first leg has only served to amplify that kind of feeling of not apathy towards it, because obviously it's a Champions League game, we all care, we're all going to tune in, but it just feels like there isn't the same kind of hype around this game as there would have been had it occurred last season. I think the whole run we made to the final, of course, coupled with the fact that we are in the midst of a title race that I think everyone would surely say takes precedent over this game, especially given the 2-0 lead and the supposedly weaker opposition, but I'll come on to that argument a bit later on in the show. But there is kind of this general feeling that no one really seems to mind, and I think really we should be getting very, very excited about this, because at the end of the day, if Liverpool win or get any sort of result that sees them through on Wednesday night, we're through to a Champions League semi-final, and we'll know our opponent by that point as well, which makes it even more exciting. It will either be, and it could already be, by the time you're watching this, Barcelona or potentially Manchester United. Either way, that's a massive tie. Barcelona, a huge European institution, a team that we've got a little bit of recent history playing against as well, earlier on in the noughties. And then, of course, Manchester United needs absolutely no introduction. So Wednesday night's a pretty exciting game. At the end of the day, Champions League quarterfinals are never dead rubbers. They're never useless games. They're never matches that aren't worth watching. They're always a game you should be tuning into. You want to see what happens. You want to see this Liverpool team on the big stage, because this does not happen often. And even though all eyes are still kind of on the title race, if you're of that kind of persuasion where you get a little bit nervous, treat it as a little bit of a break, because provided things don't go horribly wrong early on, this game should be not a walk in the park. I'm not going to jinx it. I'm not going to say anything that's going to come back to bite me, but whatever. The kind of game that we maybe don't need to worry about as much as some people have been, on edge with the last few league games. So it is a massive opportunity, like I said, to get through to a semi-final, the team that we could play in that semi-final, to be one step away from the final. How fantastic is that? We should be getting excited for this game, and it's also, I think, poised perfectly for us in terms of we've got that very good advantage. Like I said, score a goal and this game is pretty much over. I can't really see Porto scoring 4 against us, certainly not if we land the first blow of the game. It's kind of similar to the situation we had at the Stadio Olimpico last year, where we scored early, we sucked a lot of life out of them, and I think even though Roma came back into that game a little bit and even pushed it pretty close with a couple of goals right at the end of the game, I think that early goal really killed any momentum that they were trying to put together, and as long as no one lashes it in off Jimmy Milner's face 5 minutes later, we should be reasonably fine as to that regard. So it's poised very, very well for us. We like to play on the counter-attack, so a situation where the opposition is going to get at us and almost have to leave space around at the back, because Porto don't really have any other choice than to commit more bodies forward, because they attacked reasonably well at Anfield and still didn't manage to find a way through, so they're going to have to think about some different way of going about it this time round. It's set up for Liverpool to probably score at least a couple of goals, and hopefully, even if there's not a huge amount riding on it, even if it already feels like it's dead and buried already, this tie, at least enjoy it, because scoring goals in Champions League quarterfinals is always something great to watch. You want to see players do it, and it's always great for players' confidence as well. It makes them happy, and it makes us happy as well. So even though it's not the biggest game in the world, and we're almost saving up all that big European night energy for what we hope will be a semi-final, I'm trying not to talk about it as if it's a foregone conclusion in this video, but this Liverpool team is so good, and so good at, not buckling under any sort of pressure, that I think no one can see past the Liverpool victory, or at least Liverpool qualification, out of the scenario we're in at the moment. So team news going into the game. We haven't had Jurgen Klopp's press conference yet. That's probably going to come either Tuesday or Wednesday afternoon. I'm not really entirely sure how close to the game it'll be. It'll probably be sometime on Tuesday, but that's going to come a little bit later. So we'll learn a little bit more about maybe injuries that players have picked up in training. Obviously, there's a small turnover time between these games. So far, we've actually been the fixture list has been pretty kind to us in terms of the gaps we've had between games. We've had a lot of Friday night games like the one we had before the game against Porto, and should we get through to the semi-final. We'll have a Friday night game before that first leg as well. So that's kind of worked out in our favour insofar as the players never really get anything less than a 4 or 5 day recovery time. This time they've only got 3 days. They've got just over 72 hours. So I think that's definitely going to come into the picture, and that's why I think Jurgen Klopp's press conference is going to be interesting, because if anyone does need just a 1 extra recovery day or is carrying a small knock that means they can't take full part in training, that this time is going to have a huge bearing on whether or not they play a part in this game. So keep an eye on that for sure. In terms of other individual player news, Jordan Henderson did pick up a knock in the game against Chelsea. That's why apparently he was substituted on, I think, 77 minutes for James Milner. However, Jurgen Klopp has basically allayed any fears about that and said, look, everything's absolutely fine. There's nothing sort of permanent wrong with Jordan Henderson. So you imagine in theory he should be all right for this game. Although, as I said, if it is even just a small knock and he has to only do half of a training session on Tuesday, that, like I said, has a huge bearing on whether or not he plays any part in this game, certainly from the starting 11. So Jurgen Klopp has got some decisions to make with his starting 11 here. I think rotation, because of the small turnover between games, and of course the prioritisation of the league, and the fact that we're already in such a strong position, and also the fact that we've got plenty of good players in the squad who deserve a bit of game time in the Champions League. I think all of those reasons come together to make me think that this is going to be a slightly different 11 to the one we saw against Chelsea, and probably a slightly different 11 to one that we'll see for pretty much every single game between now and the season. So as for how I think we're actually going to line up, I think there's one player that I don't think there's any doubts about: Alisson Becker in goal, of course. The centre-back pairing, I think Virgil van Dijk is nailed on. Even though I talked about rotation, I think there are certain anchors that you need to keep in the team. And I was kind of thinking about the starting 11 that I was going to predict and thought, oh, that player can get minutes, he can get minutes, throw him in. And I thought, slow down here, because before you know it, you've almost pretty much fielded a B team. And while on paper that seems fine because our squad is very, very solid, like I said, you still got to have anchors in the team who are going to maintain that level of consistency. And also sometimes it's actually quite good for players to play regularly, even weekend, midweek. Some players that just works for, especially the young ones as well. So I don't think we should change it around completely, hence why I think players like Virgil van Dijk have probably got to start this game. But alongside him, I'd tinker a little bit and I'd put Dejan Lovren back into the side. I think Jurgen Klopp is toying with the idea of maybe making Dejan Lovren Virgil van Dijk's first choice partner for at least a few games between now and the end of the season. He's certainly performed well against Porto. It's interesting to see him thrown in completely from the cold in that situation. And also Joel Matip, is someone who didn't really get that much football at all in the first half of the season. And since then, since Lovren and Gomez's injuries, has been very, very busy indeed. So I think Jurgen Klopp is being careful with how he manages his fitness there. And I think this will be another game where he probably misses out, also just for a little bit of rotation to freshen up the side. Have some fresh legs in there who maybe haven't played so much football. And Joel Matip did have a good, solid, energetic game against Chelsea at the weekend. So then Robertson, I think, definitely plays at left back. He got a little bit of a rest in the first leg, so there shouldn't be any problems there. Right back, I think, is an interesting situation because, like I said, young players you can almost treat a little bit differently here, and you can play them constantly without too much rest. But I do think Trent Alexander-Arnold, he's had a few injury problems, so maybe that comes into Jurgen Klopp's reckoning. So maybe James Milner comes in there, possibly even a Joe Gomez, who has, of course, been on the bench for a couple of games. Wasn't on the bench against Chelsea, but I think that was probably because he was playing in the under-23s, which is a very good sight, seeing him get some more football. So I think the fact he's played with the under-23s and played very well, I don't know if any of you have seen a few moments from that game, but he looked a level above all of them, which isn't a huge surprise given how good we know Joe Gomez is. But he's played in those games. He's also been on the bench, so I think he plays some part in this game. But even though we've kind of got it wrapped up and everything like that, I do think you start stable. And then, like I said, if we score and they've got to score 4 or something like that, then you can consider starting to bring someone like Joe Gomez into the side to give him a little bit of football right before the run-in gets really, really interesting and potentially really, really hectic in terms of the fixture list should we qualify for the semi-final as well. So I think you start with Lovren and Van Dijk in defence. I think you have Trent at right back, Gomez maybe a shout, maybe Milner as well. But I think you're messing around a little bit too much there. I think for stability's sake, you keep Trent in there. Then the midfield, I think this is where you make a few changes because Henderson and Keita have been really, really good. They worked well in that partnership, the sort of trio in midfield against Chelsea. And I think based on how they played and the different merits of each player involved in that system, I wouldn't be surprised if Jurgen Klopp actually considers that as his go-to midfield for pretty much every fixture between now and the end of the season. Certainly in the games where he wants to field a full strength 11. And I think given the fact that Henderson and Keita were very much in and out of the side before that happened, I think he maybe will want to give them a rest in this game just because otherwise you're springing an awful lot on them in a short space of time. So I think if they drop out, I think you keep Fabinho in for stability, and also he's become a figure that Jurgen Klopp seems to like relying upon. And obviously, if Porto are going to put us under pressure and we need to manage the game a little bit, we need someone who's going to make a few snide fouls here and there just to break the game up and kill any momentum that they try to put together if they get up for this occasion, like I think they probably will, especially with it being at home as well. So I think you need a player like Fabinho in there. Either side of him, I think you go with Gini, who's a fantastic player but hasn't got that much football recently, and then James Milner, who Jurgen Klopp really does trust as just, a very, very steady man to rely upon in midfield. And I think the fact that I want to play Milner in midfield is kind of why I've put Trent in the side. I think if someone else was playing there, by all means, put Milner at right back. I wouldn't mind that at all. But I think this is the kind of game where you want to have Milner in the middle of the park just for a little bit of reassurance. And then the front three, I think one player certainly has to get rested here. It's up to Jurgen Klopp who. I've gone with Firmino dropping out the side because he had a fantastic performance against Chelsea. He absolutely gave it the beans, and we've seen in the past how a rest can rejuvenate Firmino. He missed out in the game against Watford, and then I think he came off the bench against Everton a few days later. And I think after that, he did look a little bit revitalised. His natural game that we know he can all play, came back almost instantly. So I think giving him a little bit of rest right before what's going to be a really, really intense run-in, where we are going to ask an awful lot of him, I think is a good idea. So I think he drops out, and then you basically go with the front three that worked so well against Watford, where you have Salah on the right, Mane down the middle, and Origi on the left. I think, I don't want to sound like I'm just saying it's pace for pace's sake, but we are going to do a lot of counter-attacking in this game, and I think all three of those players thrive in that kind of system. And also, Divock Origi has been fantastic over the last couple of months and just deserves a little bit more football. So taking a little look at Porto then, obviously, I think we all know how they're going to approach this game. I kind of mentioned it earlier, how they are going to try and probably ride a tidal wave of emotion. They're going to try and make this a big, famous European night for them. We've seen comebacks in the Champions League in very recent history. Roma last year, Ajax this year as well. We've seen underdogs topple big sides when they've had difficult deficits, and a lot of the time it's all about riding that wave of emotion and getting that to spur you forward and give you the second and third wins that you need to overcome big obstacles like this Liverpool side is going to be for them. So I think it's so important that we manage the game carefully, and that's why I picked the players that I did. It's why I think Virgil van Dijk has to start to just kind of keep the defence very, very calm. It's why someone like Fabinho's needed to break up the play, and then Milner's needed as another reliable figure in midfield. And I think if we manage our way through it and we play our cards right, we can exploit it to the max. But we saw what happened with Porto at Anfield, that when they have the game, when they have the game by the scruff of the neck, they can actually be pretty threatening. They had us on the back foot, and even though they didn't really create anything out of that, I think if they, like I said, they're probably going to slightly change the way they attack for this game. They'll also be a little bit more open to committing players forward simply because of the fact that it's at home and they haven't really got anything to lose at this point. Whereas I think in the first leg, they sort of thought 2-0, not a bad result. We can take that back and hopefully overcome that result in the second leg. So they're probably going to commit more men forward. They'll probably change the way they attack and stuff like that. I doubt they're going to go through Marega as single-mindedly as they did in the first leg, because we kind of got lucky insofar as he had a bit of an off night in the first leg. We let him through far too many times. Unfortunately, his finishing just didn't really seem to be working out for him on the night. I also think, if he gets chances, he'll probably bury them, because a striker who scored as many goals as he has in the Portuguese league, I think it's 20 or something like that, and you can say Portuguese league and whatever, but the goals are the same size. There's still a goalkeeper to beat. There's still a defender to get past. So if you let him have chances, he'll probably score at least one of them. So we've got to be really, really wary of that. And I think just basically manage the game really carefully and try and do what we did at Anfield, where even when they have the ball and it looks like they're putting pressure on and it looks like they're dominating the game, we've always got the situation under control. And I think having certain personnel on the pitch who are experienced and able to deal with that kind of situation is so important. Obviously, also they had a game at the weekend which they won 3-0, so that's a nice comfortable win. They probably won't be too tired for it. I mean, I was actually surprised that they even had a game, because often European sides tend to get a weekend off in the league simply because the local FAs and stuff like that try and do as much as they possibly can to give them an advantage in the Champions League. But I suppose 3-0 for Porto. I doubt they even probably played some of their best players, even though they are stuck in the thick of a title race. By the sounds of it, it didn't look like it was too difficult opposition. So all eyes, of course, for them will be on this game. And we've just got to make sure that it doesn't become an occasion. Make sure that it is exactly what it was at Anfield. Routine and just Liverpool doing what Liverpool do, and anyone who's watching the game and doesn't want us to win is just totally deflated by how easily we dominate the match and get the result that we need. So listen, of course I think Liverpool are going to go through. I don't think anyone, you'd be mad to think anything else. In terms of score predictions, I think maybe 2-1 to Liverpool. You know, I can see them getting a goal because, like I said, they had chances at Anfield, and I can't see Marega drawing a blank again if we give him as many chances as we do. And I think they'll get more chances as a team in general, simply because of how much they need to score goals in this game. But I do think that'll leave options open at the back. I think Jurgen Klopp will tailor his team to take advantage of them on the counter-attack, and hopefully once we get that goal, we can start to bring some players off, chill everyone out a little bit, maybe give Gomez some minutes, give Shaqiri some minutes, maybe even Ox. I don't know. I have no idea where the guy is. He's been playing a little bit for the under-23s, so he's getting closer and closer. Whether we really see anything from him this season, it remains to be seen, but maybe we see a little bit of football from him. That would be absolutely lovely. But aside from that, I do think Liverpool will win. I think we'll absolutely, definitely get the result that will see us through and hopefully get us through to a semi-final against either Barcelona or Manchester United. How fantastic is that? So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very, very much for watching. As always, if you did enjoy the video, hit that like button down there, hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Wednesday night after we've hopefully battered Porto and made our way through to the semi-finals of the Champions League. Until then, bye for now.